So Modern Warfare 2 is still rolling out globally, but depending on when you jump into the game, you'll be met with, of course, the new weapon grind of maxing out weapons. Thankfully, weapon leveling isn't as high on most weapons. I think the highest that we've seen is around 30 for weapons that do not have a weapon leveling platform. But when you cap off a weapon and you hit max level on it, you'll unlock the ability to tune that weapon, a mastery perk for maxing out a weapon that allows you to take those attachments that you can use and adjust them ever so slightly more. Today, we're breaking down how to do this, what all is adjustable, and how useful it really is. As we go along, drop your thoughts below. What do you think of the weapon tuning system in Modern Warfare 2? Like it? Dislike it? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. But if you enjoy the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We have so much upcoming here for Modern Warfare 2's launch window and beyond. And as of recording this, we're on that home stretch to pushing towards 500,000 subscribers, which is actually insane to consider. It may have even happened by the time this video goes up, which in that case, truly, thank you so much for the continued support through this build up to launch. Looking forward to what we can do together here in the future. But if you're new, you want to know about all things going on in Modern Warfare 2, and you'd like to join the community, I would truly love to have you. And finally, check out my friends at G Fuel. Code Espresso is bumped up to 30% off your entire order in celebration of the launch of Modern Warfare 2. And if you'd like to join us, we're live on Twitch, likely right now as of this video going up. So come join in. But anyways, let's talk about weapon tuning. Again, this is unlocked once you end up completing a weapon's max level. So unlike other games recently, Modern Warfare 2 does not have uniform weapon levels, except for when you're looking at things like your launchers and some of those secondaries. But whether it's a weapon platform that you max out that has a handful of different subsidiary weapons, or it's a weapon that just is its own platform that doesn't have anything below it, once you end up maxing out that weapon, you end up having the ability to entering that weapon tuning. Now from here, you can tune almost everything. Not every single attachment will be tunable, but you can tune your optics, barrels, muzzles, underbarrels, ammunition, rear grips, and the stocks. Now each of these offer up their own sort of bonuses and how you can adjust them one way or the other. For example, the optics you can fine tune towards either aim down sight speed or flinch resistance, and as well either close or far eye positioning. Barrels, you can end up fine tuning the recoil steadiness and aim walking speed, as well as the aim down sight speed and damage range. Muzzles, you can fine tune towards either recoil smoothness or aim down sight speed, as well as aiming idle stability and bullet velocity. Underbarrels, you can fine tune towards either recoil stabilization or aim down sight speed, as well as aim walking speed or aiming idle stability. Ammunition, you can fine tune towards either damage range or recoil smoothness, as well as either recoil steadiness or bullet velocity. Rear grips, you can fine tune towards either recoil steadiness or aim down sight speed, as well as sprint to fire speed or aiming idle stability. And finally, the stocks, you can fine tune those towards either aim walking steadiness or aim down sight speed, as well as aim walking speed or aiming idle stability. So you'll see some crossover here. Of course, if you end up having some attachment slots filled up, you might be able to sort of stack those sort of fine tuning that you can do to each to further improve one attribute over another, but each specific category has its own pros and cons. Now, to me, I think probably the most useful out of these come down to your recoil stabilization you can end up using in further controlling your shot naturally, obviously trying to mitigate as much recoil as possible. The ability to adjust your ADS is also incredibly important. Aim down sight speeds, I think, are relatively slow by comparison in this game, and especially with the TTK. If you get caught sprinting, you combine that with the sprint out time, the ADS speed, and that TTK, it's just a recipe for disaster. That's why you're seeing so many people pre-aiming corners, why you're seeing so many people hang back and end up having their gun up for those gunfights, because that's what just wins gunfights. And things like your eye positioning, that's entirely preference-based, but that's a really cool adjustment, I think. And it's something that I really wouldn't have considered, oh, that'd be cool to adjust, but now having it, I like it. Now, that said, we can adjust all this kind of stuff, but how useful is it actually? Because what we end up seeing in terms of our sliders may look like a decent bit of changes that are happening in terms of one way or the other, but really you're shifting inches, ounces in terms of weight and distance on certain things. So how much does that really fine tune the actual gameplay itself? Let's start simple. Let's talk about this eye positioning, because this is one that we can very much so see with our naked eye, that being just how close your reticle is positioned to your character model, and as such, how much the optic takes up your peripheral vision. On screen, you'll see a bit of a comparison between normal, close, and far eye positioning. The normal being that base default, no tuning whatsoever done to it here or any of the optics. But whenever you end up getting into that close eye position, on its own, you might not notice too much of a difference here, but when you look at how big it is by comparison, you might notice just how much of your peripheral view is eaten up by that optic. Now, one thing that I will say that it seems like is that the idle sway, this was not changed at all, by the way, across all three, because it seems like you're zoomed in more. That visual idle sway seems to be a bit more, but again, that's almost just the optical illusion of it. You're ever so slightly zoomed in on that target, which means that you'll see a little bit more distance between your reticle and when you go off target, as opposed to normal and far eye positioning. And then on the flip side, the far eye positioning, you do have that reticle a little bit pushed further out into the center of your screen, not as much on your peripheral vision, but it might obstruct the foreground a little bit depending on what you're looking at, because you see more of that optics rail and mount. Now that one, a bit more preference-based, but how about the things that may actually matter to your actual gunplay? What about ADS? What about your recoil stability and control? So truth be told, I tested out the ADS speed here at this, maxing out the attachments on a build that I had that was relatively neutral and kind of common ground, not really taking away from too much, adding attachments that we could tune it, but also not really heavily skewing it one way or the other. And what you'll see in this comparison is on the left, we have that regular build, no tuning whatsoever. On the right, we end up seeing that these are the tuned attachments, all pushed as far to aim down sight speed adjustments as possible. Now, it's quite possible that I got unlucky. The build that I had here wasn't necessarily the best options for it, but trying to keep a build neutral to illustrate the changes and adjustments that this can make, having to build something that would showcase these major changes kind of defeats the purpose, which we'll talk about in just a second with our overall verdict. But going through comparing the ADS speeds of the non-tuned versus the tuned, at the very most, I was seeing a couple of frames difference in terms of completely maxing it out for ADS speed, making it just a hair quicker. Is it something that's going to be noticeable in a gunfight? Maybe not. It could absolutely save your life at some point, maybe if you need to be pinpoint precise, but honestly, I was kind of surprised that we didn't see more of a deviation here between the two whenever I was testing this. And the final thing to kind of illustrate the points of tuning that I want to touch on is the recoil control and the mitigation here with this. Of course, you can tune things for stabilization, control, and a few other things like smoothness, and this did make a little bit more of a difference, I think. This is a little bit more noticeable to the naked eye and, of course, the feel of it whenever you're shooting. Where again, on one side, you'll have the attachments that were not tuned versus those that were. The tuning seemed to ever so slightly increase that recoil control so that the pattern wasn't as vertical, but the biggest thing that I noticed out of it was that the pattern itself was way more defined when it was tuned versus when it was not. You had a bit more of a horizontal pattern whenever it wasn't tuned versus when it was. So while vertically, you still may need to pull down just almost as much as if it was not tuned, you won't have to worry about it too much deviating left to right, which is probably the bigger variable and tougher bit to control in terms of just pulling down on your right thumbstick. So what's the overall verdict here of this? Naturally, I gotta get way more hands-on time here with this, but it's a fun new feature. But if you're looking to seriously fine-tune your weapon and you want more emphasis on, let's say, something like stabilizing your gun rather than ADS speed or something like that, you're just kind of better off changing that attachment, if you ask me. The overall base attachment. That might take a little bit more unlocking because of how the weapon platforming works, where attachments are shared between those weapons of the platform. So if you're in a pinch, you'd want to make these adjustments, you can before you end up unlocking those certain attachments. But if you have the option to, your best bet in terms of making the bigger changes are going to be just changing the entire attachment. Those core attachments will have much more weight and pull in going one way or the other. I'd kind of liken it to a sort of measuring tool of a sense. Let's take the American ruler, for example. Your attachments will be the change on the weapon by like a full inch, but the weapon tuning will be like maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch in terms of the most drastic of tuning that you can do. You can't do as much as changing the full attachment, but you can ever so slightly fine tune it. So that's the way that I look at it. Unfortunately, it's not a way that you can end up, say, counterbalancing the blueprint system where you can end up tuning attachments to keep the cosmetic design of a blueprint going if you don't want that attachment that it comes with. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case. This, just again, a much more minuscule level of tuning, which doesn't make it seem over the top, not too much of a crutch thing. If somebody doesn't want to go in and learn the ins and outs of this, and from a balancing perspective on a developer side, it's probably a lot easier to deal with this way as opposed to if there was so much more control over absolutely every attribute being drastically changed. So that said, that is the weapon tuning explained here. Hopefully this helped you out in some way, shape, or form. It proved insightful. If you enjoyed it, do me a favor and drop a like on the video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you guys like the weapon tuning system? Do you think it's kind of pointless? Do you think you're going to use it a ton? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts below. If you guys are new to the channel, you'd like to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare 2, I would love to have you in the community, so consider hitting that subscribe button if you find any of this interesting. But for now, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.